This is the Tree of Life, Season 18, Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be talking about the role the sleep cycle plays in substitution events and reverse substitution events. To reiterate, during reverse substitution events, pursuant to tautological natural law, the acquiescence of the vessel is paired up with objects of consciousness linked to a self-representation, which possesses the same acquiescence or affirmation. This form of substitution event creates consensus vertically, as between the vessel and the consciousness which inhabits it. Thus, in this case, there is a displacement of the original consciousness spatially. During substitution events, on the other hand, the consciousness retains its self-representation, while there is a disconnect between that self-representation and the objects of consciousness of the vessel. In this case, the acquiescence of the vessel is to the governing authority itself. The acquiescence to the governing authority supersedes the acquiescence to the impulse, and the result is the substitution of the perceived objects of consciousness. During the sleep phase of the sleep cycle, there is already a disconnect between the perceived objects of consciousness and those contextual to the vessel. In this phase, the disconnect between the perceived objects of consciousness and those contextual to the vessel includes the perceived self-representation of the vessel, because there is no self-consciousness relative to that representation. This makes sense since we saw that self-consciousness is preserved within the negational phase of digital structures. In the sleep cycle, thus, the digital structure and analog structures are in an affirmational phase, the result of an affirmational valence. That is, the disconnect between the perceived objects of consciousness in the digital stream and the context of the vessel is complete, because there is no self-consciousness with respect to the self-representation, which would ordinarily be preserved within the negational valence. Thus, there is an overlap between these two forms of substitution event during the sleep phase of the sleep cycle, where the perceived objects of consciousness are displaced both temporally and spatially. During the transition, or flipping of phase from the sleep phase of the sleep cycle back to wakefulness, as the self-consciousness accumulates, with respect to the self-representation, there is a transitionary period before the digital stream flips from an affirmational valence to a negational valence. When this flip of valence is complete, the sleep phase of the cycle is complete. Since there is no self-consciousness regarding the self-representation, during the sleep phase of the sleep cycle, it is impossible to determine ultimately whether this disconnect between the perceived objects of consciousness and the self-representation reflects a regular substitution event that is primarily temporal, or a reverse substitution event that is primarily spatial. Because once the subject begins becoming self-conscious, the result is the termination of the cycle itself as the digital stream flips to a negational valence. That's the end of the podcast for today.